Good morning, Rabbi Isai. Rabbi Isai, here we go. We're holding Daf Tzadik Tes, Omed Aleph, the top word. Bino Hani Mili. The Mishnah tells us that a kohen that cannot perform the avodah, he does not get a part of the korbanos. How do we know that? Omar Shlokish do Omar Kro HaKohen HaMechatei Oisa Yochlena. HaMechatei means Zrika. A kohen that can perform the avodah of Zrika, he can eat. Kohen HaMechatei Oichel. A kohen who does Zrikas Adam could eat. Shein HaMechatei Eine Oichel. If he cannot perform the Zrika, he cannot participate in the eating of the korbanos. As the Gemara, Uklalu, is that a serious, non-negotiable klal rule? What about the hundreds of kahanim that are in the Beis Hamikdash who did not perform the zrika? Only one kohen does zrika. It's not that all 100 hold on to the kli. One kohen does zrika and everybody gets to eat. So it has nothing to do with the one that does the zrika. So the Gemara, the obvious answer, I didn't say they have to do zrika. I said they could do zrika. Every kohen in the Beis Hamikdash could perform the zrika. They let one guy do it. Or he got whatever, he won the raffle. But everyone has the ability to do it, but not a Tvul Yaim, not a Mechusar Kippurim. He cannot do it even if he wanted to. As the Gemara, what about Harei Katan, a Katan cannot perform the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash. He cannot do Zrikas Adam. How does he get to eat? What does it mean to eat? Yachlekeno. Here's the pasuk. It doesn't mean that he eats. What it literally means is that he gets a portion of it. There's a difference. And we have to remember this because we're going to be talking about it a little bit here and there on today's daf. There's a very big difference between somebody who receives a portion and somebody who receives a piece of food. A katan, a minor, could eat. You give him a piece of steak, he eats a steak. But he cannot take a portion of the carbon. You can't take 3 pounds of meat home and to divide it up with his family. That not. If you invite him to your meal, and you give him a lamb chop, that he could eat. So there's a difference between yoichal and yichalkeno. Yichalkeno is to receive a portion. If he could do the zrikas hadam, he gets a portion. So therefore, the tvul yoim cannot get a portion because he cannot do zrika. And a katan also can't get a portion because he can't do zrika. He could get to eat, but the point is not the eating. The point is the avodah. The point is the chaluka, to get a real portion. Anybody that cannot do zrika cannot get a portion. Ask the Gemara, Harei balmum, what about a person who has a blemish? He cannot do the zrika. A person who has a mum cannot do the avodah. V'choylek, yet he can get a portion. Says the Gemara balmum rachmana rabbi. Special pasuk called zocher b'koyanim rabbis balmum. So there's a special pasuk that says that a balmum can eat. As the Gemara ve'ema kol zocher l'rabbis tful yoim. How do you know that this pasuk called zocher comes to include a balmum? We have two people that it's okay. Obviously, the pasuk is not coming to include a normal, healthy kohen. The pasuk is coming to include somebody that typically doesn't get to eat kachim. Who would that be? The Gemara says it's a balmum, but there's also a tful yaim. There's also somebody who's tamei, went to the mikveh that day, and is waiting for the nightfall. So maybe the pasuk is coming to say that tful yaim, he could get to eat the kachim, not the balmum. So we have two people to include. One out of two. Who told you to pick the balmum over the tful yaim? Says the Gemara, it makes a lot of sense that we're going to include the balmum. Why? A balmum, the Torah says that he could eat. That we saw here. If this person has a mum, he could eat kachim. We're discussing now, can a balmum get a portion? The fact that he eats, That's what I said before. There's a distinction between eating and a portion. Eating, we know there's a Mefurish pasuk that says the Balmum could eat. But how do we know that a Balmum could take a portion? It makes sense because he could eat. A Tvul Yom cannot eat, and therefore he doesn't get a portion. It makes more sense that the Torah says that a Balmum who could eat could get a portion. As the Gemara, no, perhaps say the opposite. A Tvul Yom makes more sense than a Balmum. A Tvul Yom that night is going to be perfect. He's like any other human being. He just has to wait 4 or 5 hours, and boom, by nightfall, he'll get to eat, and therefore he should get a chelik right now. Says Rashi, at night he could perform the avoida, not just that he could eat. He could perform avoida tonight. All he has to do is wait a couple of hours. Says Gemara, very good that in a few hours he could. At this moment, right now, as we're talking, he cannot perform the avodah, and therefore he is considered on a lesser madrega than a balmum who right now could eat. Rav Yosef Amar. Rav Yosef says, "Michti mayer echlenu yechal keno." When we have this pasuk over here, we already discussed that the word yechlena doesn't necessarily mean to eat, but it means that he's able to take part of the carbon, the chaluk of the carbon. So why is the Torah using a different word? If the Torah meant chaluka, so say chaluka. If the Torah meant achila, so say achila. It says achila, so it obviously means achila. Just what? Shmamino, ma'yuchlena. Shmamino, royal achila choylek, shene royal achila ene choylek. You see from here that you're right, that the point is to get the portion. But how do you get a portion? You need to be able to eat. A Tvul Yom cannot eat, therefore no portion. A Balmum could eat, therefore yes portion. It is portion and it is eating. They're interdependent. They're dependent on each other. Boy Rish Lakish. Balmum v'utame. What if not only is he a Balmum, but he's also tame? For whatever reason, the Gemara understands that if the Torah gives you a heter on a Balmum, so then the Torah will give you a heter to the tumah of that Balmum as well. On the one hand, Balmum v'utame ma'u. Ma'u shiach l'kulay. Could he still get a portion? He cannot perform that avodah. But the Torah says that he still gets a portion. He still gets to eat. Mali tame, mali balmum. So what's the difference if this guy is balmum or is tame? Or perhaps it's only somebody who is able to eat, and this guy, this balmum, cannot eat. Why can't he eat? Because he's tame, and therefore he doesn't get a portion. Amarabba, and we're going to have this one after another. These exact words, this exact raya. Tashma, kohen gadol makrivoinein. These are psukim regarding the kohen gadol. It says in the pasuk, a kohen gadol cannot deal with any of the dead in his family, even he shouldn't become tamei to his own father and mother. In the pasuk Yud Beis it says, he does not leave the mikdash, meaning he continues to perform the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash. Kohen gadol makrivoinen, he performs the avodah when he's a oinen, when he just lost a close relative, and he's a oinen the day of the death. He's considered a oinen. Nevertheless, he doesn't eat. So what do you see? And he doesn't even take a portion so that he can eat when he's not a oinen anymore that night. Shmamina, what do you see from here? It's not enough that he's able to perform the avodah. The point is that he has to be able to eat. So a Baal Mum who's tame, who cannot eat, doesn't get a portion. Because the nekuda is you have to be able to eat. You see by a Kohen Gadol that he has to be able to eat, that's why he doesn't get a portion. So to a Baal Mum, he has to be able to eat. And if he can't eat, he cannot get a portion. Wherever is Shaya. And now we're going to ask another question, it's going to be the same answer. When the Kohanim, they bring a carbon of the community. And Rashi says we're talking about that the the people bring it are tar. We're not talking about tuma shehudru b'tzibor. We're talking about regular tahirim bring this carbon. Maush yachlu kulai. He's tame. Could he get a portion? What's the question? Mi amina mechatei amar achmar. V'aynav mechatei. He could be part of the avoda of the zrika because it's for the community. Or perhaps no, since he can never eat it because he's tame, therefore he doesn't get a portion. This is what we said a second ago. Toshma, Kohen Gadol makir v'oinen. A Kohen Gadol can perform the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash when he's a oinen. But Kohen Gadol performs the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash. Performs the avodah, but he can't eat from the karbanos. And he also doesn't get a portion. Shema mino, what do you see from here? In order to get a portion, you have to be able to eat. And since the Kohen Gadol cannot eat, he doesn't get a portion. Shema mino. We learned in the Mishnah, new sogya, oinen nogeya ve'eno yimakriv. A oinen could touch karbanos, but he doesn't perform the avodah. Ask the Gemara, oinen nogeya, what? A oinen could actually touch the karban. V'remini oinen u'mechusik kipurim tzrichim tvila l'kodesh. If a oinen wants to touch a karban, he must go to the mikvah prior to that. And a mechusik kipurim is interesting. A mechusik kipurim is somebody who's tamei, goes to the mikvah. Let's say he's a zak, goes to the mikvah on Sunday afternoon. So he has to wait until Sunday night. Now Sunday night he becomes a tful yom. He's a tful yom until Sunday night, but he's still a mechusik kippurim. He still must bring a carbon the following day. He brings a carbon the following day. He cannot touch him unless he goes to the mikvah again. But we're talking about a oinen. A oinen must go to the mikvah. How could the Mishnah say that he touches the carbon? It says he has to go to the mikvah first. So there's a number of answers there. Says the Gemara. He says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, our Mishnah is talking about that he went to the mikvah. How come the Mishnah says the oinen can touch? Because he went to the mikvah as he's an oinen. And where it says he can't touch because he didn't go to the mikvah. As the Gemara, what good does it do for him if he goes to the mikvah when he's oinen? What happens when he comes out of the mikvah? He's still an oinen. His father still died that day. Didn't go away. So how could he go to how could the mikveh help him? The Aninos comes back. Rabbi Huna says that even if Einan goes to the mikveh, he remains in Einan. Says the Gemara, if the Einan is, why does the Einan have to go to the mikveh? Because he's so busy with the funeral arrangements and everything else going on in his life that he's not paying attention to stay away from Tumah. You could hear a great example. Let's say he has to go retrieve his father's body from the hospital. He's not paying attention that in the hospital there might be another dead person and the whole hospital is Tumah soil. He's not concentrating. He has Hezek Hadas. But when an Einan says, I was paying attention that I shouldn't touch any tumah like a regular kohen does, then he has the right to touch the kachim. So a kohen that wasn't Mesiach Das doesn't have to go to the mikveh at all when he's Einan. The fact that he has to go to the mikveh is only because he was Mesiach Das. Ask the Gemara, if in fact we're talking about that he was Mesiach Das, meaning he could have walked in the hospital and become Tamei Tumas Meis through the oil, then you have to treat him like a regular person who went to Levaya, and he would require 7 days of Tahara, and then on the third day has to get sprinkled, on the seventh day has to get sprinkled. How does one mikvah dunk help him? If a person says, I wasn't paying attention whether or not I was careful for Tumah, then we have to treat him to the most extreme, which is Tumas Meis. Like Asher. He was very careful not to go to Levaya, not to go into the hospital with Tumas oil, but he wasn't careful not to touch a sheretz. If you touch one of these 8 guys, he's Tami sheretz, which is only a 1-day Tumah. As the Gemara, 1-day Tumah is different than what we said. We said just go to the mikvah and you become tar. 1-day Tumah means you go to the mikvah and you still have to wait until Erev Shemesh, until nightfall. That's a regular Tumah Deiraisa, Erev Shemesh boy. How can he just go to the mikveh and touch the kachim? Now if we go back 8 lines when the Gemara says, V'ramini, oinenu mechusik kippurim tzrichen tefillah l'kodesh. So I'm showing you here, I put a chart. This is that Mishnah over there in Chagiga. It says, ha'oinen mechusik kippurim tzrichen tefillah l'kodesh. Ha'oinen and mechusik kippurim have to go into the mikvah, they have to be toivel in order to touch kachim. And the Gemara asks, how come our Mishnah says they could just touch kachim? And now we're coming up with a different distinction. He said, had esach das, didn't have esach das. He went to the mikvah, didn't go to the mikvah. What does it say at the end of the Mishnah? Truma. In order to eat truma, you don't have to go to the mikvah. As the Gemara, void afilu truma nami. Truma would also need a mikvah if you're Mesiach Das. If you're not sure whether or not you kept your tahara and you might have touched the sheretz, you have to go to the mikvah if you want to eat truma. There's such a concept that a person could say, listen, I know for a fact that I was careful not to touch Tumah D'Oraisa, but I don't know if I was careful not to touch Tumah D'Rabbanan that makes me puzzle. And Memela, I know for a fact I didn't touch a sheretz. I certainly didn't touch a dead person. And Memela, if I go to mikvah, I'm tar right away. But the Rabbanan, it's enough to go to the mikvah and you can eat kachim right away because it's only Tumah D'Rabbanan. I'm concentrating on Tumah D'Oraisa. That's what I'm concentrating on that. Tumah D'Rabbanan could be the Rabbanan came by and touched. I don't know. That I can't tell you. I'm concentrating on this. Says the Gemara, where do we see such a concept that a person is watching something, but he only watches for half? Other things could slip in and slip by. We do see this. But Tanya, and I'll prove it to you. Person has a basket full of figs on his head, and there's a little shovel, a tiny shovel to scoop out the figs. Here you could see that the magrefa is red, meaning it's tameh, and the figs are green, they're tar. V'omar, and he says, Libi ala sal v'in libi ala magrefa. My heart, my mind is on the basket and its content. I'm not thinking, I'm not protecting the metal magrefa. The halacha is asal tar, v'magrefa tmeya. So in fact, as you see in the picture, the whole basket will remain tar and the shovel will remain tameh. Says the Gemara, you see over here that I could differentiate. I say, my mind is on this and not on that. Ask the Gemara, why doesn't the shovel, that big spoon that's tameh, why doesn't it make the basket tameh? Ein kli mitama kli. This kli that's a rishon cannot make another kli tameh. Ask the Gemara, okay, it can't make another kli tameh, but why can't it make the fruit inside the vessel tameh? All the figs should become tameh. Because he made sure that this magrefa, this shovel, should not become a rishon. That's what he made sure. And therefore, since this shovel is not a rishon, it cannot make fruit tameh. He made sure that that's what's going to happen. Omar Rebbe. Sorry. So this thing rolled around a little bit by the Talmidim, and finally it came to Reb Abba bar Mamel. So Reb Abba bar Mamel tells them, didn't you hear what Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi? Ha'eichel shlishi shel truma, asur lechol umuter liga. If truma, you have a sheni, and a sheni touches truma, so the truma becomes a shlishi. Maybe it's good to go back to this chart. A sheni that touches truma becomes a shlishi. A person who eats this shlishi, a kohen who eats truma, which is on a level of tuma of shlishi, he himself, his body turns into a shlishi. And therefore what? So what if he's a shlishi? Therefore, if he eats truma, it becomes a shlishi. However, he could still touch. Ha'eichel shlishi shel truma asur lechol. He's not allowed to eat Why? Because it'll become a shlishi. Umutur liga. He's not allowed to eat truma, but he's allowed to touch truma. So what do you see from here? Alma b'achilo of rabbanim ma'alo, b'negila of rabbanim ma'ilo. You see that rabbanim were able to distinguish and say, you know what? For eating, you need to go to the mikvah. You are tameh, you cannot eat. But touch, you could touch. And memela by us, also by the oinen, you're asking me a question about an oinen. It seems like the oinen could touch in our Mishnah. But it says in another Mishnah that an oinen has to go to the mikvah. Yeah, if he wants to eat, he must go to the mikvah. But if he wants to touch, no, he could touch without going to the mikvah. They weren't makbid on touching. You see that by a kayin who's a shlishi. Weiter. Next sugi. Ve'enoi choylek lechol. A oinen cannot divide up his portion to eat. As the Gemara miflag pali, as we said before, there's a difference between taking a portion, taking a couple pounds home, and doing whatever you want with it, or just eating a piece of meat. Eating a piece of meat, a cotton could eat, but he cannot take a portion. Over here also, the oinen cannot take home meat, but he could eat. If they invite him over to eat, he could eat. Ask the Gemara Vermini, but I have a question. It says oinen oinen could eat a korban pesach. It says mufurish that he cannot eat kachim. Why can't he eat kachim? It says if he's invited over, he could eat. Our Mishnah is referring to a case of korban pesach, and in korban pesach, once Chachamim went easy on him and said, you know what, we're going to release the Isser. There's an Isser d'Rabbanan for you to eat kachim, but because there's a chiyuv d'oraisa to eat a korban pesach, there's an Isser kares not to eat the korban pesach. We're going to relax our Isser. Since we relaxed our Isser to eat korban pesach, we're also going to relax the Isser to eat kachim. The problem is in the wording. It says mefurish v'loy b'kachim. V'oichel is pischol erev av'loy b'kachim. Okay, so we have to explain that. The rest of the year, you can't eat a korban pesach, so you can't eat kachim. The Gemara explains, since you could eat the korban pesach, you could also eat kachim. Since the rest of the year you can't eat a korban pesach, you can't eat kachim. But it says before you can't eat kachim together with the korban pesach. It means the rest of the year you can't eat kachim. Ravasi Omar, maybe we should go with something less dachuk. Loikash. Kan shemeis lemeis bar basar ukvar bar basar. Kan shemeis lemeis b'shloishas ukvar bar basar. Very simple. There's a difference when the person's father died. Did he die the day before Erev Pesach or on Erev Pesach? Why? What's the difference? Because to be an oinen midoraisa is the day of the death, not the day after. So if the father died on the 13th, that makes him an oinen on the 13th, but on the 14th, when you eat the korban pesach, he's not an oinen. Then he's only oinen derabanan. Okay. What about at night? So we're going to see a whole sugya. Rav Shimon holds the night of the ptira of the father's of the person's father, person's relative, is only derabanan also. But that's the night of the day that he was nifter. So if he was nifter on the 13th, then that night he's an oinen only midrabanan. The following day he's an oinen midrabanan, but that night he's not an oinen at all. You could only be an oinen derabanan at night when you're an oinen deraisa in the day. But if you're an oinen derabanan during the day, you cannot be an oinen deraisa derabanan at night. Then there's zero. So let's see again. When the mace died on the 14th, then that night, when you're supposed to eat the korban pesach, he's a oinen midrabanan. So what happened? And he buried him that day. It doesn't really matter when he buried, but okay. So that night, he's a oinen midrabanan. And then Chacham said, you know what, you're a oinen midrabanan, we're going to relax that. So you could eat the dairais of Pesach and not be over in Karas. But we're not going to relax kachim. But over here, somebody, his relative died on the 13th. Memela on Lela, so the following day he's a oinen midrabanan. But that following night, he's not an oinen at all. That night is not anything. He's not an oinen midrabanan. Therefore, during the daytime, he cannot eat and he cannot take a portion. But at night, he could eat kachim. That's the nafkamina. Nafkamina is when he became an oinen. Did he become an oinen that day and therefore he cannot eat kachim that night? Or he became an oinen the day before and therefore that night he could eat kachim? Simple Gemara here. Man tana aninos lailom the rabbanon. Who's this man omer that says that the night of the aninos is only the rabbanon? Rabbi Shimon, he goes according to Rabbi Shimon Baicha. This Anya. We learned aninos lailom the Torah. The aninos of the night is the raisa divi Rabbi Yehuda. That is Rabbi Yehuda argues with Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon omer oinen the Torah the Sofrim. No, it's only the rabbanon. Teida, I'll prove it to you. Shari Amru oinen toiva v'oichel es pischei le'erev. Said a person who lost his father that day of Erev Pesach could go to the mikvah and eat the korban Pesach at night. Now, if Aninus was Doiraisa, how could he eat the korban Pesach at night? He's Oinen. I mean, Doiraisa is not allowed to eat it. It's only because it's the Rabbanon, and Rabbanon relaxed. The Rabbanon have the right to say he could eat it. As the Gemara, sorry, Reb Shimon Aninus Lailam, the Rabbanon, does Reb Shimon in fact hold that at night it's only the Rabbanon the Aninus? V'tanya Reb Shimon Oimer, Oinen Enim Shalech Korban Oisav. A person who's a oinen cannot send his korbanos to the Beis Hamikdash. Seems like even a korban pesach, in other words, is deraisa. Lo lebarim pesach. Everything he can't send any korban, but a korban pesach he could because it's only the rabbanon. As the Gemara Vatanya, Reb Shimon Oimer Shlomim Kishu Shalei Mevi Ve'eni Mevi Kishu Oinen. Unbelievable. If you think about what the Gemara is saying here, the Gemara says that the word Shlomim means whole, to be whole. When a person brings a shlamim, he must be whole. How is a person whole? When he's besimcha. When a person is ba'atzvos, when a person is sad, he's not whole. How do you know that if a person came out of jail, a person had a machla, neira, and he was saved from the machla, how do you know he cannot bring a korban toida when he's in oinen? Let me show you the pasuk here. It's not a good idea of a samachta. It has to be. And if you don't have simcha, you don't bring shlamim, and you don't bring a toida either, because you have to eat a toida when you're besimcha. And how do I know that a oila also has to be brought when you're besimcha? Because the only two korbanos in the world they could bring voluntarily are a shlamim and a oila. So just like a shlamim has to be besimcha, so too a oila. Menayin l'rabbis, and here's a difficult one. How do I know to include bechor u'maiser? And what's the next word? U'pesach. How do I know that a korban pesach cannot be brought by a oinen? We just said that a korban pesach is brought by a oinen. And here it says mefurish that a korban pesach not. Marbani bechor u'maiser u'pesach shekein enom ba'im al-chet. They come for their own reason, not because somebody sinned. And a korban pesach is included here. I know that you can't bring a chatas and asham when you're sad. Zevach, there's the actual word zevach to come to include chatas and asham. How do I know all korbanos? A bird, a mincha, wine, wood. So sometimes you bring a wood carbon. You bring a carbon wood. I'm bringing wood to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Like you bring oil, bring wood. Rashi says no. When you donate wood, you bring a carbon together with it. How do I know that you can't bring it while you're sad? You have to be happy. Only when you're whole. You yourself are whole. You are not whole when you are sad. But what do we do from all these korbanos? One of them mentioned this Pesach. You cannot bring a korban Pesach when you're anointed. From this entire list, you got to remove Pesach. It was just brought there because usually when it says Bechor Meiser, it goes together with Bechor Meiser Pesach. They always go together. But in fact, it's a mistake. Korban Pesach you could bring when you're sad. That's something that you bring even when you're sad. You bring a korban Pesach. And finally, Gemara says, Rav Sheshes Omar, my Pesach Shalmei Pesach. How many korbanos should one bring when he brings a korban Pesach? Don't tell me korban pesach. There's a lot more than that. So oilas riyah is a korban that you always have to bring when you go up to see the Rebbeinu Shalom in the Beis Hamikdash on Yom Tov. But there's two korban chagigas. Korban Chagiga on Erev Pesach, Korban Chagiga on the first day of Pesach, and then you also have Shalmi Simcha. What's this Korban Chagiga that you bring on the 14th? Because the way Korban Pesach works is a lot of people gather together and they become partners in this Korban Pesach. So it turns out that each person can get a little bit more than a kazayis, but you have to eat it ala soiva. You have to make sure that you're not starving. So you shecht more meat to eat, and you shecht the Korban Chagiga. So, but it's not really Chagiga. So that's what it's saying here. It's not a Korban Pesach. It's a Korban Chagiga. So the Gemara says that a Oinen doesn't bring this Chagiga, but he does bring a Korban Pesach. Omar Rav Sheshes Omar, my Pesach, Shalmi Pesach. Since it goes together with the Korban Pesach, so I could call it a Pesach. It's not really Pesach, but it's there in order to eat the Korban Pesach in the right way. So it's called a Chagiga that goes Shalmi Pesach. But isn't that in the category of Shlamim, which we said that you have to be B'simcha, and of course the Oinen can't bring it? Says Gemara, you're right, it is in the category, but it's a separate category. That's why I had to mention it. Tana Shlamim Aboy Machas Pesach, Tana Shlamim Aboy Machas Atzma. The Tana Shlamim Aboy Machas Pesach, this is the one that comes to the Korban Pesach, and it's the regular one. If I wouldn't have mentioned this one, so it comes together with the Korban Pesach, so I would think that an Oinen could bring it. Kamash Malon, that an Oinen cannot bring it. Rabbi Isai, have a wonderful day. Be'ezer Hashem, I'll be back in the Beis Medrash. If everything goes well, I'll be back in the Beis Medrash tomorrow. Have a wonderful day.
Merit the schus of spreading Torah throughout the world. Sponsor a shir today. MDYsponsor.com or sponsor at MDYDaf.com.